Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 17th work session. We have a couple directors that are on Zoom, Director Niangaro and Director Thorne, so welcome. And the rest of us are here. And with that, I will call the meeting to order and then turn it over to Dr. Cordy.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So this evening, as you know, our topic for our work session is diversity, equity, and inclusion overview. And this is one of the work sessions that we have prepared for in order to, at the board's request, really share information about our journey, the history related to specific topics, and the work that we're doing now. So that's our hope for this evening. We have got three presenters who will be sharing with us tonight: Mrs. Glavin, Ms. Carroll, and Dr. Fritz. And so they will, each of them will be sharing parts of the information within our slide deck and within our conversation this evening. And as they take the podium, one of the things that I would like to just let the board know is that you will be hearing this evening references to strategic initiatives and strategic plan goals. And as you know, because we've been sharing it in multiple different ways over the course of many meetings, in late 2019 and early 2020, had a very thorough stakeholder engagement process where community members and students and teachers and classified staff and beyond provided input into the strategic plan priorities. And that also informed our SIA investments. And so, as I've mentioned before, when the closure happened in March of 2020, the strategic plan took a back burner to all of the other things that we needed to do and lead through in order to transition to CDL ultimately and all of the other elements. But now we are able to really focus back in on that work done by that very large group. And we intend to bring to you that strategic plan to revisit it in January at a work session, but you'll hear reference tonight to the goal that has to do specifically with equity. And so I just didn't want you to be surprised by that when you hear our team members talking about that. So without any further delay, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our presenters.
Good evening, Chair Hecker, Superintendent Cordy, and board members. Tonight we get the opportunity to discuss our diversity, equity, and inclusion work within the district. Before we get started, I wanted to take some time to introduce myself and my values as they relate to this work. So as you know, my name is Tamara Glavin, and I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for our school district. One thing that I wanted to note is that I am from Newburgh, and I have a history of coming to Sherwood in that I grew up in this area, went to the movie theater and wandered Target like many of us do, and just have a good understanding of our community and the area that we live in, which is why I'm here. And when I applied for the position, I expressed how proud I was of a district that's so similar to the one that I grew up in for taking steps like we're taking, and just wanted to express how proud I still am for of the work that we're still doing and the work that we'll continue to do. Now I want to take some time to express the values that guide me in this work. First of all, my first one is attitude. And growing up, my mom always expressed that attitude is everything, and she's right. To me, our attitudes help us lead people, and we either lead with kindness and respect to where people can listen and go with us, or we end up losing people. And so when we have an attitude that is inclusionary and focused on bringing people together, that is most important and helps us gain understanding of each other. The next is courage. To me, it takes courage to ask questions and to engage in conversations where you don't always know the outcome. And with this work, there's often conversations where you don't know where people are at and you don't have an understanding of their history. So really having courage on the forefront to engage in those conversations, to ask questions, and to listen to others and work together is very important. The next is perspective. Growing up, people, and still today, people ask me how I got my curls. And to me, I always thought that was a silly question until I realized that it comes from people who don't necessarily have a history of understanding hair like mine or curls at all. And this relates to all different parts of our identity, not just our hair, but questions that people ask and just wanting to know. So I take time to really understand others' perspectives and try to engage in those conversations so I can build a better understanding. My last value is inclusivity. This work is all inclusive. We all have learning and growing to do, and we all are a part of this community. And it's important to me that you all understand that when I say inclusion, I mean all of our students, all of our families, everyone should be included in this work. And as it says in the title, inclusion is a deep part of all of this work. Okay. The topics that we will be covering tonight are vocabulary, district data, history, guidance for our anti-bias initiatives, and those actions that are our anti-bias initiatives. So first of all, vocabulary. This is so that way we can have a shared understanding of commonly used terms when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is so that way we all have a good foundation for our topics tonight and going forward. Our district data focuses on the students that we serve and the families that we serve. So reviewing information on just attendance and achievement and all of those different aspects. And then we're looking at the history of our district and the equity work within our district. And then guidance for anti-bias initiatives focuses on the information from our equity audit and our empathy interviews, as well as information from ODE and our state that guides our equity and inclusion work. And finally, the actions that are connected to helping us achieve goal 1 of our current strategic plan, which is develop a culture of equity and inclusion district-wide. So here is our first set of vocabulary, diversity, equity, and inclusion. First, diversity is a combination of a variety of perspectives and experiences that shape our community. So those pieces of our identity that help really build who we are. And some examples of this would be income status, gender, race, religion, language, varying abilities, and educational history. Next, we have equity, which our definition is justice and fairness, free from bias in the treatment of and opportunities presented to students, families, staff, and other stakeholders. This looks like identifying barriers to student achievement, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, communicating with students and families, individualized support, access to technology, and access to meals. Inclusion, creating a safe and welcoming experience by incorporating individuals' experiences and perspectives into the school community and culture and environment. Examples of this look like signage in multiple languages, making events accessible to individuals with a variety of physical and mental capabilities, just to name a few. So this is really, inclusion is really about making sure that people feel safe, supported, heard, and welcome. Our last 2 vocabulary words are anti-bias, so opposing discrimination or prejudice against individuals based on any part of their identity. Examples of this include our non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies, and we'll look at anti-bias professional development later on, so really having a firm understanding of what this term means is important for some other components of our time today. And then culturally responsive practices. So this looks like recognizing, or the definition is recognizing and incorporating the assets, strengths, backgrounds, and experiences of all of our students and what they bring into the classrooms and schools. Ensuring that learning experiences are relevant to the lived experiences of our students and their families. Fostering connection between students and the curriculum are some ways that we engage in this. Some other examples include our community circles, and then lessons and activities that incorporate the lived experiences of our students. So that could be having students write about things that they experience day to day, or write about an event in their past. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Fritz.
Good evening, Chair Hecker, Superintendent Dr. Cordy, and Board of Directors. Demographics are important to help us understand who we serve within our district. So I'm going to lead us through a demographic kind of picture of our students in our community here. Our overall enrollment has declined over the last few years, as you can see there at the top. Yet when we look at our subgroups of students within the district, what we see is an increase in the diversity of our student population. Part of that diversity is a growing ELL, or English language learner population. I also will point out that from these numbers, it looks like a decline in our free and reduced meals population of students, although it's a little misleading in that since the start of the COVID pandemic, all students are able to access free meals, breakfast and lunch, which may then lead to less families actually applying through the application process. One of the areas that we've grown most in since the 2016-17 school year is the number of languages spoken within our district. So if you look in the 2016-17 school year, we had 28 languages represented in the district. Fast forward to now, we have 44 languages represented within the district. On the table, what you see there are the 10 most common languages: English, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, German, Portuguese, Russian. I assure you there are many, many other languages in the district as well, but just to give you an understanding of the number of languages and the diversity that we have within our schools. This information is something that comes to us through student report or parent report, as each student, when they enroll, the family is required to fill out a home language survey. So we're able to get this for each of our students. This next section really talks about attendance data. Overall, as a district, we have really strong attendance. As you see up at the top there, our average is really well above 95% attendance. Per the Oregon Department of Education, regular attenders are defined as having greater than 92% attendance, which means the equivalent of not missing more than 17 school days during a school year. However, when we dig deeper into the subgroups, go back here. As you can see there, that's not necessarily a statistic that holds out for all of our students. So there are groups of students within the district that are not even near the 92 percentile or 92% attendance of good attendance.
Director Adamson, did you have a question? Yeah, and I don't know if Dr. Fitz can answer this, or perhaps Christine. Do our newsletters translate into all 44 spoken languages? Or most of them?
So school messenger that we use for direct emails, I don't believe represents all 44. However, all of our schools, well, a couple of years ago, our district newsletters, we began using the SMORE format, which translates into any language that Google will translate. And this year, all 6 of our schools adopted SMORE for their newsletters as well. So we've really tended to, at least the newsletter portion of our communications, really targeting those additional languages in a new way. And we continue, for one-off emails and those types of things, we do have a significant number. I don't know the number that School Messenger represents, but it is less than the 44 total.
Thank you.
So again, looking at attendance, when we break that down into subgroups, the two groups that really kind of are a standout, not only around ethnicities, but our free and reduced meals students. And that again, just gives us a glimpse into socioeconomics. When we break down our free and reduced meals even further, you can see the data around where those groups of students are and the percentage of students in each of those subcategories. And again, just to highlight that I really don't think that it's a drop off, even though we were above 14% in the 18-19 and 19-20. When we hit 2021, we're taking into a consideration the pandemic and the fact that meals then translated into being available for all students without completing the necessary application. Again, free and reduced meals as it's broken down by some of our other subgroups in the district. This next section looks at our students that are eligible for special education services, or we refer to it as student services. And I would just highlight that while our enrollment in the district has declined over the last few years, we have really remained pretty consistent in our percentage of students that qualify for special education services. And then I'd also want to just point out within that, a couple of subgroups that stand out. So our students that are Black or African American are 3 times as likely to be identified as being eligible for special education services, as well as males are almost 1.5 times more likely to be identified than females. That's not unique to the Sherwood School District. That is a national norm, but that's just something for us to be aware of. Similarly, when we talk about students that are eligible for special education services, we see our students that are English language learners are almost twice as likely to be eligible for special education services. And again, our students that are eligible for free and reduced meals, a similar number there. So again, this is just an opportunity to have a better understanding of who we're serving in the district, which is really important when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we're looking at not just the overall numbers, but we're breaking it down into our subgroup of students. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Marlene Carroll, Interim Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and she's going to walk us through some achievement data.
All right, thank you, Chair Hecker, Dr. Cordy, and Board of Directors. As Dr. Fritz mentioned, when we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion work, part of the work that we look at is our achievement data. Every year, the Teaching and Learning Department carefully analyzes our student achievement data from our state tests. We use the data to look at a variety of indicators and trends. For purposes of this presentation, we're going to look at our 2018-19 achievement data because this is our most recent and most complete data set. In 2020 or 2020, our students did not take the state assessment. And in 2021, many of our students opted out of the state assessment due to the pandemic. We anticipate that we'll have a much more complete data set at the end of this school year. And the intention of reviewing this data set in particular is not to compare ourselves to different schools across the state or nationally. It's just to look at where we are in Sherwood and comparing different student groups in Sherwood. Okay, so with that, I want to take a moment to really explain these graphs and how to read them. The categories at the bottom are female, male, free and reduced lunch, special education, ever identified as English learner, talented and gifted, Latinx, underserved races and ethnicities, and white students. The blue line that you see represents our all student average on state testing. So that's our average of all students. That means that the black bars represent student groups who outperform the all student average. And the white bars represent student groups who underperform our all student average. So in this graph, you can see that on the language arts test for 3rd through 5th graders, our male students are slightly underperforming compared to our female students who are slightly above the average. We're going to look at a series of these achievement scores. All right. Again, in grades 3 through 5, we see similar trends for our students in math. The black bars represent the percent above the overall average student performance on the math assessment. Students who receive free and reduced lunch, special education services, and students that ever received English language development services fall significantly below the overall average. In grades 6 through 8, we see similar trends. As a reminder, the black bars represent the percent above the overall average student performance. Students who receive free and reduced lunch or have ever had English language development services are still underachieving compared to the overall average. We see similar percentages to the previous slides. And the trend continues for grades 6 through 8 in math. We see very little difference here, though, between males and females. But we still see that that certain student groups are underachieving and some are overachieving, like TAG. In high school, only our 11th graders take the state assessment in language arts and math. In language arts, we still see females, TAG students, and white students outperforming the overall student average. Our 11th graders show a different trend in math. Here, males, TAG students, and white students outperform the overall student average. So why is this data important for us to review and look for trends? Our team uses this to monitor our own goals and the growth of our district. Our most recently published strategic plan states that our goal is to increase student achievement for all students. But as this data shows, we have some continued work to do. And ultimately, our goal is to eliminate these predictable patterns. All right, I'm going to show you a couple other sets of data. But it is worth mentioning that over on our left side in the 2018-19, our slide, oh, it's fixed, I think. Okay. So our freshmen on track. Our freshmen on track to graduate is a tool that the state and school districts use. We've talked about it before, but just to kind of update, states use this to predict if a student is on track to graduate by the time they are a senior. And so they're 9th grade students. And for Sherwood, this means that our freshmen must earn 6 credits by the end of their 9th grade year. But this also means that they can fail 3 or more courses in a given year and still be considered on track to graduate. The graph from the 2021 report card on the right side highlights the impacts of the pandemic on our students, especially students from certain groups, including our male students, students on free and reduced lunch, ever English learners, and students with disabilities. Okay. Our 11th grade students, oops, finally, one last slide around our graduation rates. This is from our most recent report card data released by the state. State graduation data is reported every January. However, the report card that this data is pulled from is released in the fall. Therefore, graduation rates shown in these reports are from the class of 2018 and the class of 2020. In January, we'll have a more comprehensive report of our graduation data from 2021. But this slide shows an increase in graduation rates for most of our student groups. In fact, our overall graduation rate increased from 97% to 98%. Rates took a pretty significant jump across the state, and that is likely due, at least partially, to the different requirements on graduation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the importance of this information is that our current report card, as is, doesn't really illustrate the impact of the pandemic, but we will likely that will become more evident in the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic, the extended school closure on this data that's released in January. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tamara to continue. There you go.
Now we're going to take the opportunity to review equity work within our district or previous equity work. So at this time, we'll look at previous strategic plans, our current equity lens, and then a professional development opportunity that was given to our staff. While we look at this information, I do want to note that we have been doing equity work within our district for many years prior to 2015 and prior to 2020. So this work is not something that is new to our district. It's just something that we might be more aware of right now. So the first strategic plan we're going to look at is from 2015. You can see that equity was embedded in our goal number 2 with a focus on hiring and retention, maximizing relationships and communication between staff, students, and families, and then creating and implementing an equity plan. The 2017 strategic plan kept working on some of these goals. So we embedded equity in goals 1, 3, and 5, expanding on the work that we saw previously, like I stated. And goal 1 focuses on the equity plan from 2015, as well as focusing on culturally responsive teaching practices. Goal 1 and 2 continue to focus on communication and relationships with and between staff, students, and families. And goal 2 also includes looking at staff recruitment, retention, and development, again, as we saw in the 2015 strategic plan. And then goal 5 focuses on deployment of technology. So this might look like making sure that people have devices, but then also do they have access to Wi-Fi and any other resources that they may need, so that way students can further their learning at home and have access to the materials that they need. Our 2018 strategic plan expands on the goals from 2015 and 2017. Also focusing on student outcomes and achievement and looking at the data that we just reviewed. An additional focus of this strategic plan is our current equity lens, a culture of care, as well as staff succession plans. And here is our current equity lens, which was established in April of 2017 and is something that we will likely revise to better fit the students and staff that we currently have within our district. The goal of this equity lens is to provide guiding questions for decision making, and it's not to answer the questions yes or no, but to dive deeper into conversation and to really focus on how we can support our students and our families within our district. This lens is designed for a variety of settings, including operational focused conversations, instructional conversations, can be used district-wide, school-wide, in our classrooms. Also, it's used by teams and individuals. And this is purposely designed to slightly slow down the decision-making process in that we make sure that we consider the needs of all of our students and our families. A good example for this would be talking about our technology rollout. So really questioning who's affected by the decision. And if we were to take a hypothetical, if we were to roll out new technology to our middle school students, let's say hypothetically, then we would talk about who's affected, and that could be our students, our middle school staff, our technology department, and other district members. Next, we would look at the groups or the underserved groups affected by this decision, and it could be potentially positive. They could be affected positively, or it could be a negative impact. The positive impact might be that they gain access to technology if they don't have some at home already. And then next, we're looking at how does this decision reduce or increase disparities, and it could reduce some disparities, but it could also increase for others who don't have access to Wi-Fi at home or internet at home. It could also increase some disparities of who is at home to support the use of technology. So are there parents or adults that can help, or older siblings that can help students? And then it could also impact families who have values surrounding technology use. Some root causes of those disparities might be income or the location of your home. So sometimes people don't actually have access to internet where they might live. The values of the family, and then the family makeup. So again, who is at home to support students? And lastly, we have the perspectives to consider, which could also closely relate to who's affected by this decision. So students, families, district staff, and also departments within our district. This is all focused on who is impacted, why they're impacted, and how do we lessen the potential negative impacts. So really looking at who and how we can help and why. Here we have Bridging the Gap, which was a professional development opportunity for our staff. Over the years, we have had 5 facilitators from outside of our district, and that was 5 facilitators over 4 years. They led various professional development opportunities for our staff, but it became clear that we needed somebody within our district that understood the community, that was rooted here, and could really help where the needs of our district were, and to really understand where we're at with our equity work, which is why I am here today. Back to Bridging the Gap, it was a professional development opportunity, and this occurred over 3 years. The facilitators would come in during our monthly admin council meetings for about 2 hours, and then afterwards they would engage in a session with our staff as well. So in total, there were 6 2-hour sessions, and 100 certified and classified staff engaged in this voluntary opportunity. Bridging the Gap utilized information from Zaretta Hammond's Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. This book discusses the impact and importance of incorporating students' cultures and experiences within the school. And it is given that information is given in a data-driven way. So examining neuroscience and how our culture impacts the way our brain processes information and how we build relationships. And when your culture isn't represented in your classroom, the impacts that has on you and the way that you receive information that your teacher might be trying to give you. If any of our board members are interested, I'm happy to provide a copy for your reading. Please just let me know if you would like one. Other information during Bridging the Gap discussed culturally responsive practices that we established a vocabulary term for previously, and then we also discussed or it was also, culture was also discussed, bias, and then microaggressions. And microaggressions are verbal or behavioral slights that create or communicate hostile or negative attitudes towards individuals. Feedback from staff indicated that they found this training valuable, but they wanted more information and more support for using that information within their classrooms. They were also seeking support on having conversations with students and fellow staff members regarding things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They also wanted time to examine the culture within their school and what their school culture looks like and how it impacts students. And they wanted information, or they wanted to see the information spread out to the rest of our district. So not just being in those sessions, but so that their coworkers and other staff members could have an idea. This information also came out of our equity audit and empathy interview. So there was some connection between the feedback that we received with Bridging the Gap and our phase 1 of our audit and interviews. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Director Carroll so she can go over phase 1 of our audit and interviews.
Okay, so in the spring, we brought to you the equity audit and empathy interview work that we did in the teaching and learning department. And a lot of that work was done through using a tool that was designed to really seek information from our stakeholders, including students, families, and staff. And we interviewed about 81 participants, and each interview took about an hour, and then an additional hour to collect the data and input the data. And then there's all the other logistics that go along with that around scheduling, canceling schedules, things like that, that we had to navigate. And so this work was incredibly important because if you've ever participated in an empathy interview, it gives you an opportunity to really just sit down and have a conversation. That's what they're structured to be like. And it's hard when you don't always have the time to actually take the time to do these interviews. And so some of the work that the DEI director will bring to this will be the time and energy to really give to these interviews and the equity audit work. And so we're really excited about that. In addition is the information that we receive from families and students and staff that directly gets shared with our equity visioning committee, because they don't have the opportunity to go and, interview 81 different people and spend an hour with 81 different people, but we can write up that report and share that with them so that they can have the information they need to meet with, to make decisions and advise and really give thoughtful work. And so Tamara's going to share a little bit more about her plans for phase 2, but we wanted to kind of share where we were so you had that piece of information.
Can I ask you guys one quick question?
Yes.
How were your 81 participants selected, or how did you pick them out?
We didn't actually pick them out. We asked, so for students, for staff specifically, we asked if you want to participate, please just reach out to us. So that was staff. For our families, we asked our equity visioning committee if they had any families that they wanted us to interview. And so they kind of like created a web for us. And then for students also, teachers just ask, like in essentially a homeroom, do you want to talk about this, or do you want to talk, would you feel comfortable talking with someone? And they reached out. We also did some forums for students. So, one of the student groups that we wanted to know, wanted to get information from were students who were linguistically diverse. And so we reached out and said, would you want to participate? Not all of the students wanted to participate, and we did not push it or anything like that, but we just kind of reached out. How that happens for phase 2 might look a little bit different, because I think that, and you'll probably speak to that, but there, Tamara has more time to dedicate to the process. So she'll share a little bit more about that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into phase 2 of our audit and our interviews, which is a part of our initiatives to reach our goal 1 of our strategic plan, I do want to share with you the guidance or the kind of information behind the creation of these initiatives. So first of all was our equity audit, or phase 1 of our equity audit and our empathy interviews. After that and following that, we have the Oregon Department of Education's equity initiatives that are rooted in student identity and civil rights, not only just for students, but also for families. And then Senate Bill 732, and that is something that we will also be discussing. So these are the objectives you'll see for the following, the initiatives on the following slides. All of them are rooted in equity and inclusion with the goal of accomplishing our goal 1 of our strategic plan. So developing and supporting affinity spaces for students and staff, engaging staff in the creation and implementation of our equity leads, and ensuring that an equity lead is present at every building. Or every school building, and then conducting phase 2 of our equity audit and our empathy interviews, continuing our anti-bias equity focused training or professional development for our administrators and staff with established learning goals. And then based on all the work that we accomplished this year, revisiting and seeing which initiatives that we will be creating or working on for the next school year.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
What's an affinity? Oh, it's on the next slide. Never mind.
I got you. So Affinity Spaces is our first action, and an affinity space is a place for a group of individuals with similar backgrounds, interests, and or identity factors. So oftentimes people know affinity spaces or have a connection to affinity spaces when it comes to race and gender, but this affinity spaces are really for everyone, and it doesn't have to just be focused on race or gender. It can be whatever you might be interested in. So we already have student spaces. These are student-driven clubs at our secondary level. So the high school has 24 clubs, and some examples include the Asian Pacific Islander Club, Chess Club, Dungeons and Dragons, Future Farmers of America, Key Club, National Honor Society, Red Cross, and Youth in Government. And these are all, again, affinity spaces because they are ran by students and they're based on established interests or commonalities. Next, we have our middle school, and they have 7 clubs. Some of these examples are Archer's Book Club, Board Games / Movie Club, Saga, and Tabletop Gaming Club. I do know that there is an art club, and I was told that there's 100 students in that art club. So that is a lot of interest in art, and they're really just participating and building that community. And that's really what all of these clubs and spaces are about, is building community, building connection. And it gives students an opportunity to have some structured social time. And it also brings students who might not necessarily talk to each other or be connected to each other, opportunities to have those connections and those conversations outside of class. We're also looking at creating affinity spaces for our staff. We have some already, but part of this goal is to establish lunch and learns. And this would be where our staff can come together and connect with each other. This is something that I would like to participate in which staff can ask me questions and we can just engage and really build our community and get to know each other. Also establishing affinity spaces. So we have some already, and this looks like staff playing basketball together, or book clubs, teams or departments that staff are already taking part in. And we do know that we have staff who have been asking for spaces that directly relate to their identity. So establishing a space for our staff of color, our LGBTQ plus staff, and staff who are seeking allyship skills, so just furthering their knowledge. All of these spaces that we'll create for students, or spaces that already exist for students and for staff, really do impact our first goal of creating an inclusive environment. It also can bring future staff and future students to our district. So having these established and having them known will help people understand that we are a safe and welcoming, inclusive environment and district. Our second action is focused on an equity advisory committee. So we already have our equity visioning committee. This year, the goal is focused on transitioning our visioning committee from our advisory committee. And this goal is really to lay a foundation for the coming years. And we'll get into Senate Bill 732 and how that impacts. But we do have a cushion year and some time where we can really establish a firm foundation and firm roots for our equity advisory committee in the future. So this year, we wanted to make sure that members from our equity visioning committee could still have their spot. So we reached out and engaged with people and asked if they still wanted to be a part of our committee. Some said yes, some said no. And we also wanted to expand our application process based on some feedback from our equity audit and our empathy interviews. Some people expressed that they felt like the same people were chosen for roles repeatedly rather than having equal or equitable opportunities to engage with our district. So we expanded that and created an application process in which people could fill out the application that was on our website and then also sent out to people via school newsletter. In total, we had 27 applicants, and then members from the teaching and learning team and myself reviewed those applications. With our review of the applications, we focused on the long answers. So why people wanted to be on the visioning committee, and then why, what they liked about our district, what they wanted to see change. And while identity factors are important for our visioning committee, we really wanted to know what the people wanted to see within our district and why they wanted to join our committee. So after the review, we invited 9 applicants to interview with myself and a returning member of our visioning committee. From there, the people that we interviewed and the people that we accepted were invited. Currently, we have 25 members on our committee with room for 2 more students. So we wanted to really safeguard some space for our students to join us. Our initial meeting was held on Monday, November 8th. In that time, we focused on introductions, group agreements, Senate Bill 732, and then creating a vision or a vision statement or a why for our committee. And here is the application information that went out to families and was on our website. So this is the what our committee is, and then the why it's important and who we're seeking. And we were seeking people who could not only work with other people from different backgrounds, but who were inclusive and looking to make our, continue making our district a inclusive district to all. And then, as I have talked about, Senate Bill 732, or as I've mentioned, so this is an overview of a bill that instructs school districts to create and establish an equity advisory committee that will advise the board and the superintendent on policy decisions and situations within the district that impact our underrepresented or underserved students. This could be something that you will see from OSBA in the future or Oregon School Board Association. And it will take effect July 1st, 2022. And with first meetings being established in September of 2022, our district can have until September of 2025 because of the number of students that we have in our district, but we want to be ahead of schedule as always. And really make sure that we are keeping up with our surrounding districts. And we already have a similar structure in place. We have our visioning committee, so continuing with what we have and really making sure that we have a good foundation for our future. So other components to be aware of in the future, board members and the superintendent will collaborate on the selection of our future committee members. At least one member from the Equity Visioning Committee is to serve on the district's budget committee. School districts will create a self-evaluation process involving the public and create a communication process that involves parents, students, teachers, and employees surrounding local goals. So some of these we will be working on engaging with. Others, again, we're just this year laying a foundation during our cushion time to really make sure that we have a solid knowledge of the procedures and really making sure that we are solid in our knowledge before fully engaging with some of these provisions. So the duties of our Equity Advisory Committee include, again, advising the board and superintendent about educational impacts of policy decisions, informing the board and our superintendent when situations within our school district arise that impact our underserved or underrepresented students, and then also provide guidance on how to best handle the situation. Our committee can also prepare an annual report that contains information about the successes and challenges the school district has experienced in meeting the educational equity needs of our students. Recommendations the committee made to the board and superintendent, and then the actions that were taken in response to those recommendations, and then any other information required by the State Board of Education. Action 3 focuses on our district equity leads. So this was a very similar process to our equity visioning committee, but just a fewer number of people. So our equity leads are people that are within our buildings and they know our buildings. They're staff, not just teachers, but certified and classified staff that can help develop and implement building level inclusive, equity focused plans and activities. So think celebrations and events like that, and can also mentor and guide our building staff as we continue to engage in equity work. So if there are questions or things like that, they can always engage in those conversations. And then also collaborating with myself and building leadership on where we should go next with the building equity work. We had 13 applicants total. A team of myself and some other leaders within our district reviewed the applications and engaged in an interview process. The applications were sent out to all of our staff, as I stated, and also on our website. And our application information looks very similar to what was given out with our Equity Visioning Committee application. So again, the what it is and the why, and then who we're seeking, and it's very similar attributes: strong commitment to bettering our learning environment, striving to be an advocate for inclusion, ability to collaborate with people with different backgrounds, and ability to mentor and guide staff. Action 4 is phase 2 of our equity audit and empathy interviews. So this phase is focused on gathering information surrounding our curriculum and instructional practices. There is a goal of increasing our stakeholder engagement by 20%, so we can raise the number of people that we're talking to and engaging in those interviews. We will be interviewing current students, family, staff, focusing on their experiences within our district. And we'll be looking at doing individual interviews as well as group interviews or forums. Our visioning committee will be helping us review the information and making recommendations on organizing the information, as well as collaborating with us to adjust some current initiatives and strategies for future school years. Action 5 focuses on administrator anti-bias professional development. So continuing with the professional development we've been engaging with, focused on inclusionary practices related to leadership and expanding the scope of that professional development to include other aspects of identity. Another part of this is checking in with our administrators. That's something that's very important to me, so we can have more of one-on-one information or conversations. And this is focused on learning goals related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This can look like answering questions or providing resources if asked and necessary, and then also just engaging in conversations surrounding our perspectives and our shared knowledge. Next, we have staff anti-bias professional development. So for this year, I have been engaging with staff during staff meetings, and we've so far been talking about school culture and organizational culture and what that looks like and how we can include more perspectives. We will be talking about intersectionality, which is the different components of our identities and how they overlap, as well as bias and aggressions. I've also taken time to go out and mentor staff and work with staff on various events that happen, and also just providing guidance on how to handle different situations. A lot of what I also would like to do is just foster a culture of understanding and inclusion through this work, and also engaging with staff during lunch and learns. So building those connections with staff, really getting to know each other, and just answering questions in a way that is, or having conversations also in a way that's less formal than our professional development sessions within our staff meetings. And then action 7 is continue our equity initiatives. So based on what we've learned and what we've accomplished from this school year, revisit and develop the initiatives for the next school year. And then ensure that our initiatives are embedded or connected to our district's strategic plan. Now I would like to open it for a discussion.
Anybody, questions, comments?
I wanted to thank you for coming here and sharing all that with us. I know that at least since I've got on the board, I've heard a lot of questions or seen them on social media asking what your role is, what your job is, what you're going to do for the district. And that was a much more clear scope of what your job is than I've ever had. So I hope people that are listening at home could tune in and hear that as well and understand better what your goals are in our school and feel comfortable with what those goals are. So I appreciate you sharing those.
Absolutely.
I'll second that. Exactly what Abby said. So that was helpful to hear that presentation, both for myself and I'm sure for members of the community as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Thorne. Just in case anyone wasn't sure who that was. Yeah, I'm just really grateful that was so much data. Some of it's kind of, it's hard to digest. We've been talking about the achievement gap for a very long time. And, the fact that we know there are certain outcomes for groups. So I really appreciate all the data. I think it's going to be interesting to see, what that looks like post-pandemic, because we've kind of got a 2-year period that sort of the data is going to be off or skewed or different. But I do think, even in the pandemic, we're seeing the same trend. It hasn't really changed. And I truly hope it hasn't worsened, but I fear that it probably has in some ways. And so I'm glad that we're focusing on that achievement gap and helping students and families with good outcomes. So appreciate it. It's great data. Thank you. Dr. Adamson.
Thank you. This was an amazing presentation. I really appreciate all of the data because I think it helps us center, what all of this is really about, which is how do we help students, all students get to the achievement line together and really meet their full potential. And I'm kind of curious if you can talk to us tonight about, or if it's easier to come back with information later, what does the educational research tell us about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? Is there evidence that as other districts have implemented these in other places in the country, has it improved or reduced the predictable disparities? Because I'm looking forward to a day when we see charts and there isn't the same groups achieving and the same groups underperforming, but the individual characteristics are not a predictable indicator of achievement. So there's some information that you have about that. I think that'd be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. We do see districts in other parts of our state really engaging in this work and improving their achievement gaps or closing those gaps. And a lot of it has to do with students feeling seen and heard and understood. And then also teachers understanding where students are at and our educators understanding where they're at so they can meet them where they're at. A lot of the information that people have shared with me is that when they incorporate culturally responsive practices, it helps students, it kind of lowers their affect and helps them get the information, and it comes in a little differently because they have those relationships with their teachers and with their classmates, and they're not necessarily feeling like they're unsafe and on edge. So they're able to process and gain that information. And so just making sure that we have those relationships and establishing that people are people and that they're welcome here is a big component of those changes that we've seen in other districts.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Anybody else? Okay, I think that's it. Thank you all so much. That was an awful lot of work, a lot of preparation, I'm sure. So we appreciate it and we look forward to hearing more as you move forward with this work. So thank you all for being here and everyone for tuning in this evening. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn the work session. Our next meeting, it's noted that it's going to be December 8th, but I think there's several of us that have a conflict on December 8th. So stay tuned because I think we're going to consolidate to one meeting and we would meet on December 15th as planned instead of both the 8th and 15th. So I believe we'll probably be having our full work session board meeting on December 15th. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.